Great. Nick, Sasha, welcome.
Hello.
We're just waiting on a few more folks that have registered in advance. We'll probably wait till about 5 after the hour, and we'll get started. Right, I think we can get started. I'm pretty sure we will have a few folks joining us over the course of the next several minutes, which is okay. I think most of them are familiar with the material that we'll be presenting tonight. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this cold Thursday night. This is one of the reasons why we like virtual meetings. It's nice to stay inside. My name is Brian Slack. I'm Principal Transportation Planner for the Ulster County Transportation Council, and tonight we'll be presenting a project that we've been working with Pissarro Associates out of Rochester, New York, focusing on looking at new facilities for UCAT's growing fleet. Going back several years, I can think back to conversations I had with UCAT directors, probably back to Bob DiBella, have indicated to us a need for more space for UCAT's fleet. As I think everyone is aware, UCAT currently hosts their maintenance and storage facility at Golden Hill within that complex, the Ulster County government complex up there. And that facility has met the needs of UCAT very well over the course of the years, but ever since the completion of the Kingston City Bus and UCAT merger, we've been starting to focus more on looking at UCAT's needs 10 to 20 years into the future now to see how we can accommodate UCAT's fleet during that time frame. So UCAT reached out to us and requested the Transportation Council to utilize our transportation planning funds, which are provided to us by the Federal Transit Administration, to look at and assess UCAT's spatial needs based on that 10 to 20 year growth horizon and identify potential sites throughout Ulster County that could potentially accommodate those needs. And so that was our goal and objective of the UCAT Fleet Facility Site Selection Study. And in just a few moments, our friends at Passero Associates will walk us through the process and the findings of that study. One point that I do want to make right at the very beginning is that this project is very much at the initial concept level, the concept development stage within the entire planning process. That means that we have not identified funding for any implementation at this point in time. It's really essentially a needs assessment so that we can better position ourselves to get a better sense of essentially size needs for the facility and costs and what our options are going forward so that we can get a better sense of what funding sources we might need to seek in order to meet the maintenance facility needs going forward. If you could go to the next slide, Austin. Before I hand the floor over to our consultants at Passero Associates, I want to point out that we've been working with a technical advisory committee throughout the beginning of this project. We started work in September 2020, and Passero has done a great job keeping us on schedule and working us very rapidly up until to this stage in the project. We've taken partners from throughout the county and the region to assist us from their specific areas of expertise. We have Saja Ahmed, who's with us tonight, Director of Ulster County Area Transit. Dennis Doyle, our director, who also has joined us, who is the director of the UCTC as well as the Ulster County Planning Department. Nick Vosda, who is our deputy coordinator from the Department of the Environment, has given us very critical input regarding the electrification utility needs for the facility and how the facility might meet Ulster County's green infrastructure requirements going forward. Evelyn Wright from the Department of the County Executive and has been working with us. Dan Coots, our transit advisor from New York State DOT Region 8, as well as a number of individuals from our Ulster County Buildings and Grounds Department, mainly Jacob Blosser, projects manager, has been offering us a lot of input on the existing facility and information on utilities in the area, as well as other support from other individuals from the Department of the Environment and UCAT. They've been very helpful in getting us to this point. So those are that's the introduction. I want to let everyone know that we will provide an opportunity for live question and answer at the end of our presentation. And if you do have questions as we go along, feel free to use the chat function at the bottom of the Zoom application and submit your questions there, and we'll certainly get to them in a timely manner. Also, I want to point out that this is a draft concept plan. And we are accepting public comment at this point in time through the end of February. February 26th, Friday, is the deadline for public comments. My contact information will be provided at the end of this presentation, and that is where you can submit public comments. You can also find it on the Ulster County website and on the project page. So at this point, I'd like to hand the floor over to Stephen Trobe, who has been assisting us with the project. He is an architect with Pissarro Associates in Rochester, New York. And his staff, including Austin Goodwin, who's with us as well tonight, have done a great job in preparing these materials and draft concepts and working with us through this project step by step. So at this point, I'm going to give the floor over to Steve and Austin.
Okay, great. Thank you. First of all, I have to make sure I'm unmuted. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes.
Great. I haven't made that mistake yet. Austin, can you go to the next slide, please?
Sure.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure working with the Technical Advisory Committee. It's really been a great process, and everything we've asked for has come in a timely fashion, and we've really enjoyed working with your group. What we've got here tonight is certainly not the full report. That's a large document that is available for view, but we just wanted to go through some of the highlights, show you our process, and where we have landed with this process of reviewing the need and the possibility of locating a new facility or an expanded facility for the expanding bus fleet and all the operations necessary. So this is a quick overview of the things we're going to talk about, a little executive summary, what we're trying to achieve with this project, exploring the possible sites. We did look at social justice considerations. We've got a site selection matrix coming up, and we defined costs for each one of the options, and ultimately we have a recommendation. But I want to highlight these two images to the right on this slide. So we really decided fairly early that the three options we were going to look at were what we're calling Site 1, which is the existing facility, and expanding on it. So in other words, adding to it conceptually makes a lot of sense because we co-locate maintenance next to storage, next to administration, all having it on one close, concise campus. The second site we looked at was just across the street, up the hill on Golden Hill as you wind up, sort of the extension of Golden Hill. So that acreage, which is all wooded right now, and so that's a place that makes sense. It's owned by the county. It's in close proximity. All the buses are already up on the hill. And then the third site we looked at was down by Tech City. We chose a location for it primarily in the parking lot, and the main reason it's there is because it's out of the 100-year floodplain, but it really could go anywhere in this location that made sense. And it has pros and cons to it. One of the pros is that it's very easy to build on. It's flat, it's open, it's very accessible. The negative is it's remotely located, not remote as in not in another world, but not adjacent to the existing facility, which has its own challenges. So those are the three sites we looked at, and we'll walk you through our process and some of the things we discovered along the way and tell you where we wound up. So Austin, next, please. So I think it's important to remember, because it seems probably like yesterday to you, that the existing facility up on the Golden Hill site currently was built in 2005. And it probably was planned and programmed several years prior to that. So if you think about it, it's coming up on almost 20 years old. It probably feels like yesterday, but a lot has happened in 20 years. You've merged with another agency. The fleet has expanded. slowly converting to electric buses. Not to mention the building code has changed. More administrative staff, more training. Now we're in COVID and everyone has to be dissipated, but hopefully we'll at some point come back together. And what we're seeing in that current location is it's extremely crowded. We've got some photographs here of buses that have to be stored outside. You put outside electricity so you can heat the blocks at night, but it's not a great location for buses to be in our climate. Austin, I think you can go to another slide. Yeah, so we've got the aerial view that shows that buses are parked around the perimeter, cars are jammed in, and in the back is a fueling station, which is hard to navigate into. We've got parts in multiple containers now and storage buildings. And the parts storage is becoming a big issue because I think there's one more slide. There's, you click again, Austin? There you go. That's me standing up on the upper level where limited part storage is. We have a small, up there, we have a small lounge space for all the employees that are now there. And there's a couple of more slides, I believe. Yeah, so that's the dispatch area at the top. And believe it or not, those tires which are sitting out have become a critical issue because they're heavy. They're several hundred pounds each with the wheels. They're hard to move around, especially in the winter. And in the winter time, they become very brittle and they're hard to put on the wheels. And the wheels are hard to put on the buses when they're sitting outside in the middle of the winter. So those things should really be stored inside, but they obviously they're overflowing. So all of these things are becoming problematic. And by the time this project gets thought through, defined, funded, and built, optimistically, maybe 5 years. So we're going to be 25 years past when we first started looking at this facility. That's a long time in this world. Things change. Things are much too dynamic to wait that long, but you're being fiscally responsible and frugal and doing all the right things. So that's kind of the big why, is because you're just running out of room and you're starting to really lose efficiency, and the critical resource and your major expense, which is the buses, are starting to get compromised because they're sitting outside. And a big portion of this is preserving your fleet. This is another thing that we examined, which is the electrification of the fleet. That's a goal and a process that's happening, and that requires a lot of infrastructure, electrical needs. It does require some space, and it very much doesn't require, but it's much more efficient if the buses are indoor and ideally warm, because the batteries are much more efficient and the charging is much cleaner and takes less time when the buses are being charged inside rather than outside. So again, as you start to invest in upgrading and replacing the fleet, the need for the inside storage of the buses becomes more critical. So this is something that we evaluated and becomes another reason why this starts to become important. Austin, I think we have one more. Oh, okay. So this is where we started with the white sort of blob that goes under the circle to the left. Under the circle is the existing facility that we just described. You can see in the background is the water tank. And so we looked at the option and the practicality of putting those red roof extensions onto the site. You can see that it wasn't a linear expansion because we start to fall off the hill in a really dramatic way. So we angled the addition, But even there, and Austin was just pointing it to, I think with his cursor, we still have to create some pretty significant infrastructure to even shoehorn out, I'd call it that, onto the site. Those walls are 30 to 40 foot tall. And we also realize that we're starting to encroach on the neighborhoods. In terms of a social justice aspect, this starts to become a burden as it hovers close to the neighborhood. And beyond all of that, this water tower that you see in the distance has a significant trunk line that goes underneath this building we're erecting. So either the water line has to get moved or the building has to be built in such a way that it can bridge that water. And then it becomes almost very difficult to maintain. So as we started to look at all of these issues and the cost associated with it, this started to be a less viable site. Ultimately, we didn't consider this because of all and more of the issues that I just described. We were creating more problems than we were solving. This one, site 2, which is across the street, and we've kind of changed orientation, but off to the upper right is the existing UCAT facility, and we're now on the other side, the south side of Golden Hill. And we looked at a lot of different geometry up here, places to put it, orientations, and we decided on this one because as you come up the hill on Golden Hill Drive, it gets to the upper part of the site and we don't have to blast into that rock that's right in the middle of the site. And we didn't do as much cut and fill. From an engineering standpoint, this became a much more practical location. And we can get 30,000 square feet up here, which ultimately will house all of the buses that are projected for the next foreseeable future. We're projecting approximately 40 buses between the two, 49 buses between the two locations. But that we don't know when that's going to happen, but we want to plan for it so you have the capability of expanding this facility into that many buses in the future. One of the things you'll see in part of our going forward is this can be a phase project too. We could do a smaller building to accommodate the buses we have currently and then start to do expansions. But this site has a lot of practical positive things to it. And one of the things we like about it is it's close to the existing facilities. So things like the maintenance bays, which are there, and the wash bay and the fueling station and the administrative offices are all very close. You can walking distance, certainly driving distance if you come down with the buses. But it makes operations much smoother because of its proximity. So those are some of the pros and cons we looked at. Austin, how about the next? There we go. So here we show a pretty simple building over on the Tech City site. As I described earlier, this is very straightforward. We have lots of real estate, lots of places to build and set up for building without disturbing things. We can get it out of the floodplain. Its biggest negative or con, and I think this shows up next, Austin, is its distance from the Golden Hill site. And this is as the crow flies, but if you need some service that's over at Golden Hill, this is some time out of the day. And so what we were recommending that if you were to build or consider at the Tech City site, some of the facilities that you offer at Golden Hill, not significant maintenance, but some degree of maintenance, some degree of offices, some degree of dispatching would have to happen kind of in duplication of what you've already have. And it starts to make this more expensive because you're building more building. Yeah, so what we're showing here is these are some of the dual resources you would have to have in order to build a remote location. And you'd have to have technicians at both locations, which also adds cost and makes the operations less efficient. So we also thought it was important to look at environmental justice, and we just put here, you probably know this very well, the out of the circular, the importance of social justice, making sure that we do no harm, that we look at spending the money and building a facility that is good for you and good for your neighbors, and adds to the justice of the environment and doesn't deplete from it. And we think, you know, the only one that it has a negative impact on the region is probably option one, because it gets fairly close to the housing, and I think we have some slides on that. So these are showing the 3 sites, and you can see the proximity of where Austin has his cursor is site 1 to the housing. It's the closest one to housing. We think site 2, which is the one to the south, has some buffers to it. It's surrounded by trees. It's further away. It's more up the hill. And it's also shielded from potential development by the Department of Health building. It's kind of over the hill. And so the potential future possible affordable housing that's shown on there probably would not come up Golden Hill Street or Drive. It would access from there. So we don't think this site 2 has any negative impact on the surrounding neighbors. And then we have one more slide. Oh, okay, we go to the traffic. So this is our traffic. It wasn't so much a study, but just a kind of identifier of what the conditions are, because one of the conditions is we have these buses and it has a pretty significant intersection at Route 32 and Golden Hill Drive. And we wanted to know what, if anything, impact could be at this intersection. And it's interesting, there was a study done internally with your department and showed that there were 8 total crashes at 120 months. And of those 8, all of them were a collision of some kind between a wildlife and a car. There were no car or vehicle on vehicle incidents. That's pretty remarkable. And it must mean that that intersection is working really well. And the reality is it's already taking all of the traffic of the buses you currently have. And we see that the increase in buses is going to be fairly slow. Increase in numbers of buses is going to be fairly slow and never get to the point where it's going to make these numbers be much worse than they are. So that to us in our world is almost insignificant. And so we think this is a very positive traffic situation that this intersection. Okay, so then we go to our site 3 at Tech City. Very small residential area, no significant impact there, and we're mostly surrounded by industrial complex and commercial activities. Really no impact currently. We did talk a little bit about what the future of Tech City might hold, but we can't predict that right now. We don't really know. So at the moment, very minimal environmental justice issues here either. So I think, since we've kind of eliminated site 1, site 2 and 3 both produce almost negligible impacts on either traffic or environmental justice, and I think either one of those could be a viable option in good faith. So we then started to populate this scoring matrix, and what you see graphically is on the left is site 1, or the existing Golden Hill site. In the center is site 2, and on the right is site 3. And the way it's color coded for easy graphic reading is red is a poor condition and blue is a positive condition. So the less you see red and the more you see blue, the more positive the outcome or evaluation of each one of those sites is. I don't expect you to go through and read all this. It's much more easy to read in the report, but on this, I think from a graphic standpoint, you can see that site 2 has the most, has no negatives and the most positives. And we even took it a step further and weighted each one of our categories so that we gave an importance criteria to it. And for instance, cost to develop is more important than, I'll look here quickly, publicly owned land. We evaluated each one of these, weighted them, and even on the weighted factor, which is sort of on the right of each one of these columns, site 2 came up at a 43.25, site 3 at 40, and site 1 was around 40. So in our matrix, without us sort of pre-predicting this, site 2 came out rated the highest of all of the sites. So then we looked at cost. So this is the cost comparison for site 2. If we were to build it out fully, which is at 30,000 square feet, and that could accommodate all of the buses indoors in a heated facility and fully equipped out for the foreseeable future, it's about a $20 million project. And again, these are pretty broad brush numbers. They're certainly not to be taken to the bank at this point, but we think they're pretty safe for now. But we also looked at doing it potentially as a phased construction. So you could house just the buses you have today or into the near future, which would be maybe a 23,000 square foot building. And that would reduce the cost to 16 million. And then there would be room for adding on and accommodating in the future. And if you wanted to reduce the upfront cost even more, that 23,000 square feet could be built uninsulated, because we don't have a lot of offices and other things in this building. At least you would get everything out of the weather, and it would temper the interior space, and that could be built for around 13 million. And then if you built that first, you could then insulate it in the future, and then you could build out more space as you needed. So you could start at 13, go to 16, and go up finally to 20. Site 3, mainly because it's a lot more square footage, is 23 million. And it's more money. But it might have some other factors that are more positive that we haven't factored in at this point. For instance, that site 2 would be available for something else in the future if you needed it. That's not one of the criteria we factored in right now. This one could also be, portion of it could be built uninsulated, but harder to do because we have to build some of that infrastructure space over there, the maintenance facilities and some offices and dispatch that is going to have to be heated. So we're already bringing utilities there. So it's a tougher option to figure out where to heat and where not to heat. So this is a comparison of building cost, site cost, and full construction. So the dark green is in each one of these categories is a Tech City building. The light green, blue, and yellow are the 3 different phases that you could build on Golden Hill Site 2. And what was interesting about this graphic, I think, is so the building cost, as you see on the left, is a lot of money. It's a lot of construction dollars, but the difference in cost comparison is pretty minimum. So as a percentage of the total construction, which is the center here, dark green is Tech City, easier to build, not on a hill, not a lot of, well, there's no blasting over there, sort of simpler to build. As a factor, it's less important than how much square foot we build, which is over here on the left. And then so if a combined graph on the right, the green is all in, significantly more expensive, and you can see the phasing ideas for the yellow, blue, and light green. Site 2 still ultimately is a less expensive project. Now these are slightly bigger numbers than I showed you in construction because they also cover soft costs and fees. So with all that said, in our mind, pretty clearly, Site 2 made the most sense. It was less expensive. It is close to the existing facility, so it makes moving between the two facilities easier. And it then allows Tech City to be what Tech City is or will be in the future. Doesn't mean you maybe at some point in the distant future don't have a satellite facility out there or in some other location, but at least as a hub and for your primary fleet, this seems to make the most sense for us. So I just have a few brief slides in here of the existing building, because we can't forget that with a building that's 20 years old, there's going to have to be some upgrades, and you shouldn't lose track of those when you move forward in future planning. There are some accessibility issues that should be corrected and kind of showed graphically on this plan. You're continuing to add staff. There's offices, there's some new training facilities that should be incorporated, because right now your room is fairly small. And the bathrooms up on that second floor are kind of small as well when you're fully occupied. Also, there's one more, I think. And then we added this component into it, which is all of that exterior storage we talked about for parts. It needs to go somewhere. And so we saw that perhaps a couple of the storage bays, current storage bays, could be converted to indoor storage for those large parts and the ones that really need access to the maintenance bays more easily. And that starts to it's kind of a ripple effect. It starts to reduce the amount of buses you can store in your current facility, which makes the need for a new storage facility more acute. So it kind of works its way down the line. So we're proposing either a small or phase 1 or 2 at 23,000 up to 30,000 square feet. This building would store about 41 buses. We'd put solar arrays on the top, radiant heated floors. Those are all the things we incorporated into our costing model, and the ability to do the charging stations inside this. And then that would be what the footprint of it would look like fully built out. So a total of 41 buses inside, give or take, because it depends on the size of the buses and how they stack inside and so on, with some support facilities off to the left. And that would be a pretty significant add to your building and your components here. So that really concludes my rambling. Hopefully it made sense, and we'd love to hear from you now.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. It's been, like I said, great working with you and your team to help us make sense out of all the different variables that we have to consider here, and trying to use a crystal ball and look into the future regarding what UCAT's needs might be. There's a lot to consider, and you've done a great job in helping us to make sense out of those variables. I want to point again to, I see there's some questions, and we'll open up the floor for those in just a moment. Before we do that, I just want to point out again that this is a draft report. It's a draft concept plan that is available. All the issues discussed tonight are provided in great written detail and available on the project website. And we will accept public comments, and the comments that are delivered tonight will be transcribed as well, so you don't have to resubmit them. David, do you want to provide any instruction to our attendees on how they can participate at this point?
Yeah, I think it's a small enough group here. So if you do have questions, just throw something into the chat, and then we'll go down the list, and I may ask you to unmute. If you don't want to talk, that's fine. You can ask your question directly in the chat, and we'll read it off there. But if you do want to verbally ask it, I think we can open that up.
I also want to, well, we're waiting a second for that, just reintroduce our director, Dennis Doyle. Thanks for joining us tonight, Dennis. Did you have anything you wanted to add before we go into questions?
No, why don't you go to questions? I can always speak later. Thanks.
I see, Michael, you have a few questions. The floor is yours if you can figure out how to chime in here.
Okay, thank you very much. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm actually an employee of Ulster County Area Transit. I'm in charge of the operations for it. And I do have some concerns. Site number 2, which according to the graphics seem to be like the most feasible for everything going on. If I'm not mistaken, what it looks like is our existing facility will still house office personnel, and the buses will actually be stored across the street. Is that correct? From what I understood?
Partially correct, yes, but continue your question and we can.
Okay, so one of the concerns is that road is, even though it's not heavily trafficked, the stop signs right before our building are merely a suggestion. The Golden Hill Nursing Home traffic doesn't really seem to want to stop there. And my concerns would be early in the morning or late at night, having drivers needing to cross the street to get to the parking lot, and they'd be essentially crossing that road where, if you spend any time actually outside there, you'll see that no one stops there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. Let me just address that quickly, and then you can go on to any other questions you have.
Sure.
We did a site visit. I mean, we did multiple site visits. Obviously, we visit UCAT often, but we had staff on site at one point looking at some of the electrical needs and witnessed a driver blow the 4-way intersection. So you are certainly correct. There are some issues at that intersection. For whatever reason, people may fail to see the stop signs that are there. I don't know if we have a crash history at that particular location, but we've witnessed it too. There are some solutions that could be done. I see your point, and I'm glad it's been raised. We will make note of safety issues for staff that may need to go back and forth. There are some structural issues that we could consider, like a raised crosswalk to make that intersection more visible, and things like pedestrian bump outs to make the crossing distance a little shorter. Those are proven countermeasures at 4-way intersections that can work to make the intersection safer. There would be I believe, some meeting facilities at the new location. Since we're only talking concepts at this point, we don't necessarily know what facilities would be incorporated, but there is potential for lounge, conference, and other types of office facilities at the new location. So that might cut down on the need to go back and forth, but it's a good point. I'm glad you raised it.
Thank you.
There is one other thing is there's an existing parking lot up on the hill that is not used heavily currently, that we have provided access points to that parking lot. And if that wanted to be incorporated as driver parking for the buses that are up on this whole second location, that's also another way of adding safety to this.
Okay. What I think in that, the only thing that I see up in the air with that is, as of right now, the drivers still have to come inside the existing building in order to drop off paperwork, pick up new vaults, pick up tablets, hand this stuff in. So even if the parking lot is on that side of the road where the new site could potentially be, there would still be that need for them to cross over. The only other thing I could see with that would be the possibility of moving the dispatcher office to the other side so that, the dispatch office itself would be where the bus garage is, and then the possibility of using the existing site as like the maintenance facility, so to say, where whatever drivers come in, they just stay on that side of the road basically. And then, you'd have your maintenance facility on the other side of the road. That way, no one is crossing there.
Yeah, that is actually something we talked about because it was brought up that the dispatchers really need to be where the drivers are.
Yes.
And that would also give some expansion space for the administrative offices.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the other question that I had, if we were talking about the possibility of doing a satellite campus at Tech City, why not, due to the extensive size of availability at Tech City, just consider moving the facilities entirely over there and just, having just like a bigger footprinted UCAT on one site?
It's something that has been knocking around our heads, and we've all been trying
Well,
to.
it's actually that's exactly what the third alternative does. It does exactly that.
Okay, because from what I looked at it said, as the crow flies, and one of the downfalls would be a satellite location. So if they did need to get there, they would have to drive from one to the other. But if everything was just housed in one.
Yeah, I think, Dennis, what Michael is saying, what
Abandon the existing facility? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
That's something you don't want to do.
Okay. Again, I'm looking at things from, an employee standpoint of, the plus and minuses that I see from that perspective. Obviously, as you said, abandoning the facility, these are things well above my pay grade, but.
Well, I think a couple of things. Well, I don't want to get into it, but the idea of essentially looking at a larger facility at Tech City to accommodate a substantial portion of UCAT's operations is exactly what that one alternative does. We never have thought about completely abandoning the existing facility. It runs into some issues with respect to federal paybacks and everything else, but it's important to note that comment's out there. We'll see when we start down that road in terms of trying to build this facility. We'll see whether that works. Right now, the Tech City campus, some of that area in the parking lot creates problems for other uses that are proposed at the Tech City campus. So we'd have to do some rejigging out there in terms of trying to make it work. But it's a great comment, Mike.
Oh. Well, thank you, Brian, and thank you, Dennis. I appreciate it. That's all I have.
Thanks for joining us tonight, Michael. We appreciate it.
Of course.
Do we have any other questions from our members tonight? Again, I want to emphasize that the concept is draft, and the report is available for your reading pleasure on the website posted on the screen now, and we will be accepting comments through the end of this month.
So Brian, if I could talk a little bit about next steps.
Please.
I think it'd be important for us to understand that what we anticipate doing is going through, once we go through a concept plan where we are now, when you go through the funding process in terms of getting federal dollars to complete this, to essentially build the facility, you will go through the elements of this study one more time. You will go through how you arrived at the preferred site, additional public comment periods. That will be all part of that, the next steps that we do in terms of that. Once we start to think about where we can find the necessary funding to do that. this is sort of a convincer that basically allows us to go to the funding sources and say, there's a real issue here with respect to the size of this existing facility versus the number of operations that are trying to work out of it. It creates difficulties with respect to public safety. It also creates difficulty with respect to the maintenance of the equipment itself. So if we are capable of finding the funding, you'll see us coming back, going through a similar outreach program with respect to this, a similar analysis of alternatives before coming to a final conclusion about what needs to get done. So that becomes a design discussion with participation by the federal agencies involved as well.
Thank you, Dennis. Do we have any other questions or comments from members of the public or other staff? Hearing none at this point, I want to again thank our consultants, Stephen and Austin at Pissarro in Rochester, New York, my hometown, for their great work in getting us to this point. And we'll continue to take a look at potential revisions and additions to this report. So please consider submissions electronically if you have additional thoughts. And also thank you to our technical advisory committee members for assisting us along the way. Unless there are any other comments, I think we can call it a night.
All right, thank you very much, Brian.
Thank you. All right, everyone. Thanks. Stay warm.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, take it easy.